Well, we have more on this war of words with Joe Biden in just a moment. But first, I want to bring in National Republican Lawyers Associate Board Member Harmeet Dhillon. Harmeet, a lot, President Trump covered it a lot. Mexico, the farmers, China, North Korea. And of course, now, the battle is joined. He's going out to Iowa. Joe Biden is in Iowa. What do you see coming out of this, particularly as it feels like Biden is under more pressure this week than any other time since he officially announced?
Well, Biden is caught in a squeeze play because, as you've discussed on your show before, all of the pressure is on the left from his party. And then the president is not even in the same league as Joe Biden. He's, absolutely killing it on every front you mentioned so far this morning, diplomacy, the border, the economy, everything else. And so I think Biden is going to be flopping around like a fish out of water there in Iowa. His rhetoric is not going to be able to make up for the facts that show his weak position. I
want to change gears here, but borrow your fish out of water. John Dean, yesterday, reappearing on Capitol Hill after a few decades, the Watergate era back. What do you make of where we are now with the Democrats and this most recent effort and Jerry Nadler coming up with the deal with the DOJ for some additional documents from the Mueller probe? And, of course, John Dean is sharing his experiences and thoughts.
Well, calling John Dean to testify on collusion or obstruction of justice is like calling Michael Avenatti to testify on how do you break the bar rules, or, calling Michael Cohen on how do you violate attorney-client privilege. It's ridiculous, and it's a charade. I mean, it's really just the Democrats projecting onto this witness, John Dean, as if he were, tofu in a recipe, all the flavors they want to project on the witness. And, they really should just avoid the charade, just talk at each other, just get up there, have the cameras, make speeches, because that's really what this is about. They can't leave this narrative of Russia collusion and obstruction because they pinned all their hopes for 2020 on it, and their dream was dashed by Mueller despite his best efforts and $35 million into subpoenas and all of that. And so I'm embarrassed for Congress and for the institution. I think it's really a low point in history. We're going to look back at this and say, wow, that was a low water mark. Although, of course, they could always go lower later this week. I'm sure we might see that coming.
I'm also leaning on your legal expertise, staying in Washington, but looking at Silicon Valley. It does feel like this, it's ironic. This might be one of the areas where you have some bipartisan support because both political parties have taken aim at these large behemoths, and it started to wear on them. A lot of these stocks were hammered last week as the broad market went higher. Where do you think we are with respect to any kind of legislation, any kind of penalties, even the thought of eventually seeing some of these big tech names broken up?
If you've been watching closely, Charles, you would have seen that all of these tech companies have been bracing for a couple of years now for major regulation out of Washington. Antitrust is the one that Google and potentially Facebook fear the most. But all of them are concerned about privacy. They see GDPR in Europe, and they see lawsuits coming. And so I think that's now beginning to come home to roost. You may see that impacting the stock values. But more than that, there are lawsuits. Of course, I'm invested in this. I've sued several of these tech companies myself for their employment practices and other practices. And I think that the days of the past where they were able to grow to $1 trillion market cap, I think those are over. And I think they're now entering into a more mature phase where they're going to have to deal with, live under all kinds of regulation, maybe even some that we haven't even thought of yet.
They are certainly struggling and juggling, admittedly, in fact, with a lot of how big they've become and the sort of onus that comes with that, the responsibility that comes with that. Harmeet, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.